This style is a distraction, Jennifer. It's time to look professional. Ms. Tiffany S. Colvin's voice cut through the quiet hum of room 4B at Oakwood Academy, her heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor as she approached Jennifer Smith's desk. Her perfectly manicured hand was already extending toward the girl's meticulously braided hair. "We have standards here," she added, her smile thin and cold, masking years of buried resentment beneath a veneer of institutional authority. Jennifer's fingers instinctively rose to shield her braids. But Cole then moved with practiced speed, seizing a thick section and pulling hard enough to tilt the 10-year-old's head back. "Students at this academy don't dictate dress code," the teacher hissed. The scissors emerged from Colvin's designer blazer, heavy tailoring shears, chrome and menacing under the soft lights of the elite classroom. Snip! The sound reverberated like a crack of thunder. A single braid dropped onto Jennifer's open literature notebook, the intricate pattern her weekend stylist had woven now severed and discarded. The classroom erupted in shocked whispers and gasps. "Much better," Cole then said, stepping back with satisfaction written across her face. Jennifer didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She sat perfectly still, her jaw set, her breathing measured despite the sharp sting radiating across her scalp. Years of being taught composure by her father had prepared her for moments like this. Never let them see weakness. What Miss Cole then didn't know, what she never bothered to learn, was the small sapphire pendant resting against Jennifer's collarbone. The one equipped with a silent GPS distress signal that connected directly to a man whose love for his adopted daughter was rivaled only by his ruthless precision in protecting her. Before we continue with what happens next, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button, because the story you're about to hear will leave you absolutely stunned. The morning had begun like every other Wednesday at Oakwood Academy. Jennifer Smith had arrived with her father's driver at exactly 7:45 a.m., her leather satchel slung over one shoulder as she walked through the grand iron gates of the private school. She'd claimed her seat in Ms. Colvin's advanced literature class at the start of the semester, second row, center position, close enough to engage, but positioned to observe the room's dynamics. It was a calculated choice, one her father had subtly encouraged. Room 4B hummed with its usual pre-class energy when she entered. Ethan Park was laughing with a group near the window, showing off pictures from his family's trip to the Hamptons. Claire Donovan and her clique giggled over something on a phone screen. The faint scent of espresso from the faculty lounge drifted through the hallway. Everything felt ordinary, predictable, safe. Ms. Tiffany S. Cole then stood behind her antique oak desk, sorting through graded essays with meticulous care, her tailored cream blazer immaculate, her auburn hair styled in a sharp bob that framed her angular face. She taught at Oakwood for nearly 15 years, and she wielded that tenure like a scepter, never letting students forget who controlled the narrative in her classroom. "If you're listening right now, I need your help with something. My best friend said I'd never reach 10,000 subscribers with stories like this, but I believe these voices need to be amplified. Help me prove that truth and justice still matter." Today, we'll be discussing the symbolism of power and legacy in American literature, Cole then announced as the bell chimed, her voice commanding instant silence across the room. The conference room on the 47th floor of Smith and Vanguard International was a cathedral of power and silence. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline like a painting of conquered territory. 18 men sat around the obsidian table, each representing a different arm of operations that stretched from legitimate real estate to the shadowed corridors where laws bent like reeds in the wind. Jacob S. Smith sat at the head, his charcoal suit tailored to perfection, his expression carved from stone. He was listening to quarterly projections from his finance director when his phone vibrated against the table. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession, the pattern that made his blood turn to ice. His hand moved to the device. The screen lit up with a single notification. Sapphire alert, Jennifer. Oakwood Academy, 9:47 a.m. Jacob didn't move. He didn't blink. But every man in that room felt the temperature drop 10 degrees. The finance director's voice faltered mid-sentence. "Sir, should I?" "Continue," Jacob said, his voice perfectly calm, perfectly lethal. But his thumb was already moving across the screen, pulling up the live GPS coordinates, the real-time heart rate monitor embedded in Jennifer's necklace. Her pulse was elevated. Not panic, not fear, but stress, pain. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Across the table, Minjun Park, Jacob's second-in-command and the man who'd vouched for him when he was still an outsider in the Korean syndicate, caught his eye. Jacob tilted the phone just enough for Minjun to see the alert. The older man's expression didn't change, but his fingers drummed once against the table. A signal. Within 30 seconds, 3 men at the far end of the table received silent text messages. They stood without a word and exited through the side door. As I was saying, the finance director continued nervously, the East Harbor development is projected to yield. Jacob's phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from his head of security. Footage retrieved. Reviewing now. He opened the encrypted file. The video was grainy but clear enough. Room 4B. A woman with auburn hair. Scissors in her hand. His daughter's braid falling to the desk. Jacob's fingers curled slowly into a fist. Mr. Smith, someone ventured. Are you? Meeting adjourned, Jacob said, his voice soft as a razor's edge. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. Minjun, my office. Now. The room emptied in seconds, men gathering laptops and folders with the urgency of those who recognized a storm gathering on the horizon. Minjun followed Jacob into the private office adjacent to the boardroom. The door clicked shut with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. Jacob walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the city that whispered his name in back alleys and corporate suites alike. Who? Minjun asked simply. A teacher. Tiffany S. Colvin. Jacob's voice was devoid of emotion, which made it infinitely more terrifying. Oakwood Academy. She cut Jennifer's hair in front of her entire class. Minjun's expression darkened. In their world, disrespect to family wasn't just an insult. It was a declaration of war. What do you want done? Jacob turned slowly, and for the first time since the alert came through, his mask slipped. Beneath the composed exterior was something ancient and primal, a father's rage refined into surgical precision. I want her erased, he said quietly. Not killed. Erased. I want her to wake up tomorrow and find that everything she built, everything she valued, every foundation she stood on has turned to sand beneath her feet. Minjun nodded once. I'll assemble the team. No. Jacob's hand rose. I'm handling this personally. Get me everything, financial records, employment history, social connections, every email she's ever sent, every secret she's tried to bury. I want to know what she fears most in this world. Understood. How public? Jacob's smile was colder than winter. Very. I want her to serve as a reminder to anyone who thinks my daughter is vulnerable because I'm not always visible. I want people to understand what it means to touch something that belongs to me. Minjun pulled out his phone, fingers already flying across the screen. The principal? If he enabled this, he goes down with her. If he covered for her, he goes down harder. If he stood by and did nothing. Jacob's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. Then he learns what it means to be complicit. His phone buzzed one final time. A message from Jennifer's watch, typed with shaking but defiant fingers. I'm okay, Dad. Please don't worry. Jacob stared at those words for a long moment. Then he forwarded the message to Minjun without comment. She says she's okay, Minjun observed. She's lying, Jacob replied, his voice barely audible. She's been trained to say that. But her heart rate hasn't dropped in 12 minutes, and there's a tremor in her typing pattern. He set the phone down on his desk and looked up at Minjun with eyes that had orchestrated the fall of men far more powerful than a suburban teacher. By sunset, I want Tiffany Colvin to understand that she didn't just humiliate a student today. He leaned forward, bracing his hands on the desk. She declared war on a ghost she never knew existed. Minjun turned toward the door, then paused. What about Jennifer? Do we extract her from the school? Jacob considered this, then shook his head slowly.
No. She stays.
She needs to see that running isn't the answer. She needs to understand that when you're a smith, you don't hide from wolves. His voice dropped to something that sounded almost like a promise to the universe itself. You make them extinct. 15 years earlier, Jacob Smith had been nobody. Not nobody in the way people use the word casually. He was literally a man without identity, without heritage, without the bloodlines that mattered in the world he was about to enter. He'd grown up in foster care in Baltimore, learned to fight in back alleys, and educated himself in public libraries because school had never been an option for kids who moved every 6 months. At 23, he'd been working security for a Korean import-export company in Los Angeles. Legitimate on paper. Anything but legitimate in practice. The night everything changed, he'd been standing outside a warehouse in Koreatown when 4 men with guns arrived to collect a debt the company didn't owe. Jacob had watched his supervisor, a man named Kim Dae-young, try to negotiate. Watched him beg. Watched him offer money they didn't have. Then he'd watched them put a gun to Kim's head. Jacob had moved, without thinking. 3 men down in 8 seconds. The 4th had run. Kim Dae-young had stared at the white kid with bloody knuckles standing over the bodies of trained killers, and for the first time in the syndicate's history, saw something more valuable than blood ties. He saw potential. You have a death wish? Kim had asked, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. No, sir, Jacob had replied. I have a loyalty problem. When someone shows me respect, I can't watch them die. Kim had laughed, a sound somewhere between disbelief and admiration. You just killed 3 soldiers from the Jade Dragon crew. You know what that means? It means I'd better be useful to you, or I'm a dead man walking. Kim had studied him for a long moment, then made a phone call that would reshape both their lives. Within a week, Jacob was meeting with the syndicate's Council of Elders. Within a month, he'd proven himself in ways that made his outsider status irrelevant. Within a year, he'd orchestrated the consolidation of 3 rival factions without spilling a drop of blood, using leverage, information, and a mind that saw 10 moves ahead. They'd started calling him White Ghost. The outsider who moved through their world like smoke, invisible until he wanted to be seen, deadly when action was required. By his 30th birthday, Jacob had done the impossible. He'd become not just a member, but a leader, the first non-Korean to ever hold a seat at the table. He'd earned it through brilliance, brutality when necessary, and an unwavering code that even his enemies respected. But power had never been what drove him. The night he found Jennifer, Jacob had been investigating a human trafficking ring the syndicate was shutting down, not out of morality, but because unauthorized operations on their territory were unacceptable. The warehouse in Oakland had been a nightmare of cages and broken people. He'd been coordinating the extraction of victims when he'd heard it. A sound so soft he almost missed it beneath the chaos. A baby crying. She'd been wrapped in a stained blanket, maybe 6 months old, her brown skin ashy from dehydration, her tiny fists clenched as she wailed with what little strength she had left. No identification. No records. Just another ghost in a system designed to make people disappear. Jacob had lifted her into his arms, and something in his chest had cracked open. This tiny, helpless thing who'd been abandoned by a world that should have protected her. He'd seen himself in her eyes, alone, unwanted, invisible. Find out who she is, he'd ordered his team. 3 days of investigation turned up nothing. No missing persons report. No frantic parents. No one looking for the baby girl who'd nearly died in that warehouse. On the 4th night, Jacob had stood in his penthouse apartment, watching the infant sleep in the crib he'd had delivered. Min-jun had found him there at 3 a.m., still in his suit, still watching. You're keeping her, Min-jun had said. Not a question. Yes. The council will object. You're unmarried. You're white. I don't care. Jacob's voice had been absolute. This child was thrown away, like garbage. I know what that feels like. I know what it does to you. She'll never know that feeling. Not while I'm breathing. Min-jun had been silent for a long moment. What will you name her? Jacob had looked down at the sleeping baby, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. Jennifer. Jennifer Smith. So she knows she belongs to someone. So she never questions whether she has a home. He'd reached down and placed his hand gently on her head, feeling the soft warmth of her skin against his palm. I promise you, he'd whispered, his voice cracking for the first and only time Minjun ever heard. No one will ever hurt you. No one will ever make you feel small. No one will ever treat you like you don't matter. I'll build an empire around you so vast that anyone who even thinks about touching you will have to go through walls of steel and rivers of consequence. The baby had stirred, her tiny hand wrapping around his finger with surprising strength. I promise you, Jennifer.
You're Smith now.
And that means you're untouchable. Minjun had left him there in the darkness, making promises to a child who couldn't understand them yet. But Jacob had meant every word. Over the next 10 years, he'd kept them all, building legitimate businesses to fund her education, expanding the syndicate's influence to ensure her protection, teaching her strength and composure and dignity. He'd given her everything except the truth about what he really was. Now, standing in his office 15 years later, staring at the surveillance footage of his daughter's humiliation, Jacob felt that same crack in his chest reopen. The same primal fury. The same absolute certainty. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number only 5 people in the world had access to. The voice that answered was cold and professional. White Ghost. What do you need? I need the architect, Jacob said quietly. Tell her it's personal. Tell her someone touched my daughter. There was a pause. Then, she'll be there in 2 hours. Jacob ended the call and looked at Minjun, who'd been waiting silently. The architect? Minjun's eyebrows rose. You're calling in favors from her? For a teacher? Not for a teacher, Jacob corrected, his voice dropping to something that sounded like a eulogy. For every person who ever looked at my daughter and saw someone they could break. He turned back to the window, watching the city lights flicker like dying stars. By the time we're done, Tiffany Colvin won't just lose her job. She'll lose her identity. And everyone watching will understand exactly what happens when you make the White Ghost remember why they should fear the dark. Minjun pulled out his encrypted tablet, already assembling files. And if she has powerful connections? What if she's protected? Jacob's reflection in the window smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Minjun had seen in 20 years of working with dangerous men. Then we'll find out just how loyal her protectors really are when the ghosts come knocking. Tiffany Colvin's day had ended exactly as she'd planned. She'd maintained perfect control of her classroom after the incident with Jennifer, dismissing the shocked whispers with a sharp reminder about respecting authority. By lunch, she'd filed her standard disciplinary report, sanitized, of course, describing the haircut as a necessary enforcement of grooming standards. By the final bell, she'd convinced herself the matter was closed. The girl had sat quietly for the rest of the day, hadn't she? No tears. No tantrum. Just silent acceptance of the lesson Tiffany had been trying to teach these entitled children for years. Rules existed for a reason, and she was the one who enforced them. She hummed softly as she pulled into her driveway in the upscale Riverside neighborhood, already planning her evening. Glass of wine. Maybe order from that new Italian place. Finish grading the essays she'd been putting off. Her phone buzzed as she reached for her purse. A notification from her banking app. Account alert. Unusual activity detected. Tiffany frowned, tapping the screen. The app loaded slowly, then displayed a message that made her blood run cold. All accounts temporarily frozen pending investigation. Contact customer service immediately. What? She said it aloud to her empty car, her voice pitching higher. Investigation? What investigation? She tried calling the bank's customer service line, but after 10 minutes of hold music, a representative came on with a tone that was professionally distant and utterly unhelpful. Ms. Colden, I'm showing multiple flags on your accounts related to potential financial irregularities. I can't provide specific details, but the freeze was initiated by federal request pending review of... Federal? Tiffany's hand was shaking. There must be some mistake. I'm a schoolteacher. I don't have anything to hide. This is absurd. I understand your frustration, ma'am, but until the investigation is complete, all assets remain frozen. You should receive correspondence within 48 hours explaining. Tiffany ended the call, her breath coming in short gasps. Federal investigation? She paid her taxes. She'd never even gotten a speeding ticket. This had to be identity theft. Some kind of clerical error. She rushed inside her townhouse, dropping her bag on the kitchen counter and immediately opening her laptop. Her hands fumbled across the keyboard as she logged into her accounts. Checking. Savings. Investment portfolio. Every single one showed the same red banner. Account frozen. No, no, no. Her voice cracked. She had rent due in 5 days. Car payment. Credit cards. How was she supposed to?
Her phone rang.
Unknown number. Hello. She answered desperately, hoping it was the bank calling back. Ms. Tiffany Colvin? The voice was female, crisp, official. Yes, this is she. This is Director Patricia Morrison from the State Board of Education. I'm calling regarding an urgent matter concerning your teaching credentials and a recent complaint filed against you. Tiffany's stomach dropped. Complaint? What complaint? If this is about today's incident with a student, I filed a proper disciplinary. Ms. Colvin, we've received documentation of multiple violations of student rights, discriminatory conduct, and abuse of authority spanning the last 3 years. The evidence is substantial enough that we're initiating an emergency suspension of your teaching license effective immediately.
What?
Tiffany screamed into the phone. That's impossible. Who filed this complaint? I have 15 years of spotless. The complaint was filed by multiple sources, including parents, former students, and corroborating evidence from school surveillance footage and email records that were subpoenaed this afternoon. You'll receive formal notification by courier within the hour. I'd strongly suggest you retain legal counsel, Ms. Colvin. The board is recommending permanent revocation. The line went dead. Tiffany stood frozen in her kitchen, the phone slipping from her fingers and clattering on the granite countertop. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. 5 hours ago, she'd been in complete control. Now her bank accounts were frozen and her teaching license was suspended? Her laptop pinged with a new email. The subject line made her knees buckle. Rescission of Teacher of the Year Award. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The message was brief, cold, and devastating. Dear Ms. Colvin, in light of serious allegations regarding professional conduct and recent evidence of discriminatory behavior, the District Board has voted unanimously to rescind your Teacher of the Year Award 2023 and remove your name from all associated recognition materials effective immediately. Your plaque will be collected from Oakwood Academy tomorrow morning. This decision is final and not subject to appeal. Tiffany's vision blurred. Teacher of the Year. The award she'd bragged about at dinner parties. The plaque that hung in her classroom. The achievement that had defined her entire career.
Gone.
Just like that.
Her phone buzzed again.
A text from her principal, Dr. Raymond Hughes. Tiffany, we need to talk. Don't come to school tomorrow. I'm serious. She tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. She tried texting back. The message showed as delivered, but no response came. Panic clawed at her chest as she paced her kitchen. This was coordinated. This was too fast, too efficient, too precise to be coincidence. Bank accounts, teaching license, award, principal ignoring her calls. All within 5 hours of cutting that girl's hair?
No.
No, that was paranoid thinking. That was conspiracy theory nonsense. She was a teacher in suburban America. Nobody had that kind of power. Nobody could orchestrate something like this over a simple disciplinary action.
Her doorbell rang.
Tiffany practically ran to the door, hoping it was someone who could explain this nightmare. She yanked it open to find a courier in a black uniform holding a thick manila envelope. Tiffany S. Colvin? Yes. Sign here, please. She scribbled her signature with shaking hands and took the envelope. The courier walked away without another word, climbing into an unmarked black sedan that had been idling at the curb. Tiffany ripped open the envelope. Legal documents spilled across her entryway table. notices from the State Board, asset freeze documentation from the Treasury Department, and at the bottom, a single sheet of paper that made her blood turn to ice. It was a photograph. Professional quality. Taken from across the street at a distance, time-stamped from earlier that evening. It showed her house. Her car in the driveway. Her kitchen window with the lights on. Below the image, a single sentence typed in elegant font. You cut the wrong child's hair. No signature. No return address. Nothing to indicate who'd sent it. Tiffany dropped the photograph, backing away from it like it was radioactive. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Someone was watching her. Someone knew where she lived. Someone had orchestrated the systematic destruction of her entire life in the span of a single afternoon. And whoever they were, they wanted her to know it was just beginning. She grabbed her phone with trembling fingers, intending to call the police. But before she could dial, a new email notification appeared on her laptop screen across the room. The subject line was visible even from where she stood. Regarding Jennifer Smith, this is your only warning. Tiffany's legs gave out. She collapsed against the wall, sliding to the floor as the full weight of her situation crashed down on her. That quiet girl, that nobody, that scholarship student she'd humiliated in front of 30 witnesses. She wasn't alone. She wasn't unprotected. And Tiffany had just declared war on someone, something she couldn't even begin to comprehend. Her phone buzzed one final time. Another unknown number. Another text message. Tomorrow you'll understand what you've done. Sleep well, Ms. Colvin. It's the last peaceful night you'll have for a very long time. Tiffany sat in the darkness of her entryway, surrounded by legal documents and frozen bank statements, and realized with absolute certainty that her life as she knew it had ended the moment those scissors touched Jennifer Smith's hair. Dr. Raymond Hughes had built his career on calculated decisions and strategic alliances. 22 years at Oakwood Academy. 12 as principal. He'd navigated budget crises, parent scandals, and teacher disputes with the precision of a chess master. He knew when to stand firm and when to bend. He knew which families had power and which only pretended to. Tiffany Colvin had been his mistake, but he'd managed her carefully. She was harsh, yes. Perhaps too rigid. But she maintained order. Her students performed well on standardized tests, and parents rarely complained because their children learned discipline in her classroom. When the incident report crossed his desk at 4:47 p.m. yesterday, enforced grooming standards on student Jennifer Smith, he'd felt the first tremor of concern. Cutting a child's hair? That was excessive even for Tiffany. But the girl was a scholarship student. Single father, rarely present at school events. No PTA involvement. No powerful family backing her. He'd filed the report in his drawer and sent Tiffany a text to stay home tomorrow while he handled it. Standard protocol. Let emotions cool. Craft a narrative. Maybe transfer the girl to another class, issue a private apology, make the whole thing disappear. That had been the plan. Now, at 8:15 a.m., sitting in his office with his second cup of coffee, Dr. Hughes watched three men in immaculate black suits walk through his outer office door without announcing themselves. His secretary, Mrs. Chun, appeared behind them, her face pale. Dr. Hughes, I'm sorry, It's fine, Margaret. He stood, straightening his tie, adopting the authoritative tone that usually worked on aggressive parents. Gentlemen, I don't have any appointments this morning. If you'd like to schedule. The first man closed the door. The soft click echoed like a prison cell locking. The second man placed a manila folder on Hughes's desk with deliberate care. The third man simply stood by the window, hands clasped, watching the campus below like a hawk surveying prey. Dr. Raymond Hughes, the first man said. His voice was calm, measured, the kind of calm that preceded violence. My name is irrelevant. What is relevant is the contents of that folder. Hughes looked at the folder like it might contain a bomb. I don't know who you think you are, but you can't just walk into. Open it. Something in the man's tone made Hughes's protest die in his throat. With shaking hands, he opened the folder. The first document was a bank statement. His bank statement. Showing deposits that shouldn't exist. Payments from a company called Westfield Education Consulting, a company Hughes had never heard of, but whose transactions painted a damning picture of embezzlement. That's not, I've never, his voice cracked. Keep reading. The second document was worse. Emails. His emails. To Tiffany Colvin and 3 other teachers, discussing strategies to manage the scholarship diversity requirements without compromising the character of the academy. Discussions about which students fit the culture and which needed additional behavioral monitoring. Hughes felt his face drain of color. Those emails had been on his private server. Encrypted. Deleted years ago. How did you? The third page is particularly interesting. The man continued, as if Hughes hadn't spoken. Hughes turned the page and saw photographs. Him. Leaving a hotel in downtown with a woman who was decidedly not his wife. Timestamped. Geotagged. From 6 different occasions spanning 2 years. My God. He collapsed into his chair. Your wife doesn't know about Jennifer Lawson, does she? Your children don't know their father has been living a double life funded by money skimmed from academy renovation budgets. This is blackmail. Hughes's hands were shaking so badly the papers rattled. This is illegal. You can't. We're not blackmailing you, Dr. Hughes. The man leaned forward, placing both hands on the desk. We're giving you a choice. One chance.
Right now.
What choice? You're going to call an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. You're going to present evidence of Tiffany Colvin's pattern of discriminatory conduct. You're going to recommend her immediate termination with cause and a full investigation into her teaching practices. You're going to personally apologize to Jennifer Smith and her father in writing. Hughes shook his head. The board will never approve termination without a full review process. Teachers' union will fight it. The optics alone. The board will approve whatever we tell them to approve. The man's smile was colder than winter. 3 of your board members are currently receiving similar folders. They'll vote exactly as we instruct them. Who are you people? Hughes whispered. Wrong question. The man straightened. The right question is, who is Jennifer Smith? Hughes blinked. She's a scholarship student. Father works in corporate something. I don't. Her father is Jacob Smith. The man let that hang in the air for a moment. Does that name mean anything to you?
No.
Should it? The third man by the window spoke for the first time, his voice like gravel. Smith and Vanguard International. $12 billion in assets. Operations in 17 countries. But that's just the surface. Below that, he turned to face Hughes. Below that is a man you never want to notice you exist. Hughes's mouth went dry. I don't understand. Why would someone like that send his daughter to Oakwood on scholarship? We're not even the most prestigious. Because he wanted her to have a normal childhood. Because he wanted her to learn strength and character in an environment that would challenge her without knowing who she really was. The first man's voice dropped to something dangerous. And then your teacher decided to humiliate her. Cut her hair like she was livestock being branded. I didn't know. That's not an excuse. That's negligence. The man tapped the folder. You enabled Tiffany Colvin's behavior for years. You ignored complaints from minority families. You protected her because her test scores made your academy look good. You created an environment where she felt empowered to assault a child. I'll fire her. Hughes was desperate now. Today.
Right now. I'll.
Too late for that to save you. The man straightened his cuffs. But it might save your marriage, your children's respect, your freedom, since that embezzlement evidence could easily find its way to federal prosecutors. Hughes felt tears burning his eyes. What do you want from me? Everything we already told you. Board meeting. Termination recommendation. Written apology. But there's one more thing. The man leaned in close enough that Hughes could smell expensive cologne and implied threat. You're going to resign. Effective end of this academic year. You're going to cite health reasons. You're going to recommend the board hire someone who actually gives a damn about all the students, not just the ones who fit your country club vision of success. If I do all this, it's over? You'll leave me alone. If you do all this, the folder stays sealed. Your wife never sees the photos. The FBI never sees the financial records. Your legacy remains intact, tarnished, but intact. The man picked up the folder. But if you refuse, if you try to protect yourself or Tiffany Colvin, if you breathe one word of this meeting to anyone. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The three men walked to the door. The first one paused, hand on the knob, and looked back. You should know, Tiffany Colvin has 6 hours before her entire life becomes public knowledge. Bank fraud, teaching violations, discriminatory conduct, personal scandals we uncovered that would make your hotel photos look like a church social. By tonight, her name will be a cautionary tale. 6 hours? Hughes's voice cracked. What happens in 6 hours? The man's smile was almost pitying. She gets to meet Jennifer's father. They left without another word, the door closing with that same soft, final click. Hughes sat alone in his office, staring at his empty desk where the folder had been. His phone buzzed. A calendar notification. Emergency board meeting, 2 p.m., your office. He hadn't created that appointment. Someone else had entered it into his calendar remotely. His computer screen flickered. A new email appeared, the sender listed only as redacted. The subject line read, "Talking points for today's meeting. Memorize these." Hughes opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a precise script for exactly what he would say, how he would say it, and what outcome would be acceptable. At the bottom, a final line. Jacob Smith will be watching. We recommend you perform flawlessly. Hughes's hands were shaking so violently he could barely hold his mouse. He looked out his window at the campus below. Students walking to class, teachers chatting by the courtyard fountain, everything looking so perfectly normal. But nothing was normal anymore. He'd spent 22 years building a kingdom at Oakwood Academy, and in 22 minutes, 3 men in black suits had turned it into a prison. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A text message that made his blood freeze. Jennifer Smith will be in your office at 3:30 p.m. Her father will be with her. We suggest you practice your apology. You won't get a second chance. Tiffany Colvin hadn't slept. She'd spent the night on her couch, fully dressed, staring at her front door, jumping at every sound. The photograph of her house. The cryptic message about Jennifer Smith. The systematic destruction of her financial life. It all swirled in her mind like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. By 6:47 a.m., she'd convinced herself she needed to act. Sitting in her house waiting for the next shoe to drop was driving her insane. She needed answers. She needed to understand what was happening. She'd drive to the school. Demand to speak with Dr. Hughes face-to-face. Get ahead of whatever narrative was being constructed. She was Tiffany Colvin. 15 years of teaching. Respected. Established. She could fix this. She grabbed her keys and purse, opened her front door, and froze. Across the street, parked beneath a maple tree, sat a black Mercedes sedan with tinted windows. The engine was off, but she could see someone in the driver's seat. A man in a dark suit. Just sitting there, watching her house. Tiffany's heart hammered against her ribs. That car hadn't been there last night. She was certain of it. She locked her door quickly and hurried to her Toyota in the driveway, refusing to look at the Mercedes. This was paranoia. Just a neighbor. Someone waiting to pick up a friend. Nothing sinister. But as she pulled out of her driveway, the Mercedes started its engine. And followed. Tiffany's hands tightened on the steering wheel. 2 blocks. 3 blocks. 4. The Mercedes maintained a perfect distance behind her, not close enough to be threatening, but close enough to be unmistakable. Professional. Deliberate. She turned left onto Maple Avenue, her breath coming faster. The Mercedes turned left. She accelerated through a yellow light. The Mercedes smoothly followed through the red. Oh God. Her voice cracked in the empty car. Oh God. Oh God. She grabbed her phone at the next red light, hands shaking, and dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? I'm being followed. A black Mercedes. I think someone's stalking me. Ma'am, are you in immediate danger? I don't know. They've been following me for 10 minutes. They won't stop. I'm scared. What's your current location? Maple and Fifth, heading toward Oakwood Academy. I'm dispatching an officer now. Can you drive to a public location? Somewhere with people. Tiffany spotted a coffee shop ahead, Morning Brew, always crowded this time of day.
Yes.
I'm pulling into Morning Brew right now. She swung into the parking lot, her tires squealing slightly. She parked directly in front of the entrance where people were visible through the windows. Safety and witnesses. The Mercedes drove past slowly, the driver's face obscured by reflection on the tinted glass. It turned the corner and disappeared. Tiffany sat in her car, gasping for breath, waiting for the police. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text message. Running to the police won't save you, Miss Colden. We are not breaking any laws. We are simply watching. She screamed and threw her phone across the car. A patrol car pulled up 15 minutes later. Officer Davidson took her statement with professional detachment. Yes, she'd been followed. No, she didn't get a license plate. Black Mercedes, tinted windows, couldn't identify the driver. Has anyone threatened you recently, ma'am? Tiffany's mouth opened and closed. How could she explain that she'd cut a student's hair and now her entire life was collapsing? That mysterious people were sending her photographs and cryptic warnings? There's been some workplace conflict, she managed. Officer Davidson checked the area, found nothing suspicious, and recommended she document any further incidents. He drove away, and Tiffany sat alone in the coffee shop parking lot, feeling more helpless than she'd ever felt in her life. She couldn't go home. She couldn't go to school. Where could she go?
Her phone rang.
Her sister, Michelle. Tiff. Oh my God. What's happening? I just got a call from Mom saying your teaching license was suspended, and something about your bank accounts. Michelle, I don't. Are you okay? Do you need a lawyer? Mom is freaking out. She's been calling everyone trying to figure out what's going on. Tiffany felt tears streaming down her face. I made a mistake. At work. And now everything is falling apart, and I don't know how to stop it. What kind of mistake? Before she could answer, a shadow fell across her car window. Tiffany looked up and her blood turned to ice. A man in a black suit stood beside her car. Different man. Different car now parked 2 spaces away, another black sedan. He wasn't threatening. Wasn't even looking directly at her. He was just standing there, checking his phone, but his presence was unmistakable. Michelle, I have to go. Tiff, wait. She ended the call and started her car with trembling hands. The man didn't move, didn't acknowledge her, just stood there as she pulled out of the parking space. In her rearview mirror, she watched him get into his sedan and follow. Tiffany drove aimlessly for an hour, taking random turns, trying to lose her tail. But every time she checked her mirrors, there was a black car. Sometimes the Mercedes. Sometimes a different sedan. Sometimes a SUV. Different vehicles. Different drivers. But always there. Always watching. They were coordinating. Switching off. Making sure she knew she was never alone. She pulled into a shopping mall parking garage, parked on the 3rd level, and ran into the mall proper. Nordstrom. She could lose them in the department store, exit through a different entrance. She hurried through cosmetics, housewares, women's clothing. Her heart pounded as she glanced over her shoulder every few seconds. No one in a black suit. Maybe she'd lost them. Maybe. She turned a corner and nearly collided with a man adjusting his tie in front of a mirror display. Black suit. Sharp. Expensive. He didn't even glance at her, but she saw the earpiece. The way he stood. Alert, aware, professional. Tiffany backed away and practically ran toward the escalators. Down to the 2nd floor. She ducked into a bookstore, weaving between shelves, her breathing ragged. Another man in a black suit stood by the bestseller display, reading a book spine. He didn't look up as she passed, but she felt his awareness like a physical weight. How many were there? How many people were watching her? She fled the bookstore and found a restroom, locking herself in a stall, trying to calm her racing heart. This wasn't random. This was orchestrated. Psychological warfare. They wanted her to feel hunted. It was working. Her phone buzzed. Another message. You can run all day, Ms. Colden. You can call the police 100 times. You can hide in bathrooms and shopping malls. But you need to understand something. We are everywhere. We see everything. And tonight, you will face the consequences of what you did. Tiffany sobbed, pressing her hand against her mouth to muffle the sound. Another message appeared immediately after. 7 p.m. Riverside Tower. 47th floor.
Come alone.
If you bring police, if you tell anyone, if you try to run, we will destroy everything and everyone you've ever cared about. Your sister Michelle. Your mother. Your nephew, who just started at Georgetown. Everyone. A third message. A photograph. Her sister's house. Her mother's retirement community. Her nephew on Georgetown's campus. Timestamped from this morning. 7 p.m. Don't be late. Tiffany slid down the stall wall, her entire body shaking. They weren't just following her. They'd already positioned themselves around everyone she loved. Watching. Waiting. Ready to strike if she didn't comply. She had 9 hours until 7 p.m. 9 hours to figure out who Jennifer Smith really was. 9 hours to understand what she'd really done when she'd picked up those scissors. And 9 hours to prepare to face whatever waited for her on the 47th floor of Riverside Tower, the building she'd driven past 1,000 times, never knowing it housed the empire of the man whose daughter she'd humiliated. She pulled herself together, washed her face in the sink, and stared at her reflection. The confident teacher who'd walked into room 4B yesterday morning was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd just learned the hardest lesson of her life. Some children have families that don't just love them. They have families that wage war for them. And Tiffany Colden had just discovered she'd been fighting a war she never knew existed, against an enemy she couldn't see, couldn't understand, and couldn't possibly defeat. Her phone buzzed one final time. Tick-tock, Ms. Colden. The white ghost is waiting. The elevator to the 47th floor of Riverside Tower moved in silence, so complete that Tiffany could hear her own heartbeat. She'd arrived at 6:53 p.m., 7 minutes early, because being late felt like surrender. The lobby had been empty except for a single security guard who'd checked her ID without speaking and gestured to the executive elevator. No metal detector. No questions. Just a knowing look that said she was expected. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that looked like it belonged in a museum. Marble floors. Modern art that probably cost more than her annual salary. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city as lights began twinkling in the dusk. A woman sat at the reception desk, elegant, Asian, maybe 50, with eyes that missed nothing. Ms. Colden. Mr. Smith is waiting. Follow me. Tiffany's legs felt like they might give out, but she forced herself to walk steadily. The woman led her down a hallway lined with photographs, construction projects, ribbon cuttings, charity events. And in several of them, a man who commanded every frame he appeared in.
Tall. White.
Impeccably dressed. His smile never quite reaching eyes that seemed to calculate everything. Jacob S. Smith. The woman stopped at a set of double doors. Inside. Close the door behind you. Tiffany's hand shook as she turned the handle. The office was enormous. Shadows gathered in the corners despite the city lights streaming through windows that spanned the entire wall. The storm that had been threatening all day had finally arrived, rain lashing against glass, thunder rumbling like a warning from the gods themselves. Jacob S. Smith stood with his back to her, silhouetted against the window, hands in his pockets. He didn't turn as she entered, didn't acknowledge her presence at all. Tiffany stood frozen near the door, clutching her purse like a shield. Sit. His voice was quiet but absolute. She moved to the chair facing his desk, her legs barely supporting her weight. The desk was clean except for a single manila folder. Jacob turned slowly. In person, he was somehow more terrifying than in photographs. Not because of size or obvious menace, but because of the complete control radiating from him. This was a man who'd never been denied anything he truly wanted. A man who moved through the world knowing he was untouchable. Do you know why you're here, Ms. Colden? Her voice cracked. I cut your daughter's hair. I didn't know, I never meant. You didn't know. Jacob moved to his desk, resting his hands on its surface, leaning forward. That's your defense? Ignorance? I was enforcing school policy. The braids were. Stop. The single word cut like a blade. Don't insult both of us by pretending this was about policy. You've been targeting minority students for years. I have documentation of every complaint filed against you. Every time a parent questioned your methods and was dismissed by Dr. Hughes. Every email where you discussed which students belonged at Oakwood and which needed correction. He opened the folder and turned it toward her. Page after page of emails she thought were deleted. Complaints she thought were buried. A pattern of discrimination, so clear it was damning. But that's not why you're here, Jacob continued, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Racism, I can have you fired for. Career destroyed. Reputation ruined. That part is already done, by the way. The press has everything. It goes public tomorrow morning. Tiffany felt bile rise in her throat. Then why am I here? Because you touched my daughter. Jacob's composure cracked just slightly, a flash of something primal beneath the surface. You didn't just cut her hair. You humiliated her. Made her feel small, powerless, vulnerable in front of her peers. He walked around the desk, closer to her, and Tiffany pressed back in her chair. I adopted Jennifer when she was 6 months old. Found her in a trafficking warehouse, almost dead from dehydration. I held that baby in my arms and made her a promise. His voice was barely above a whisper now. I promised her she would never feel helpless again. Never be at the mercy of people who saw her as less than human. I built an empire around that promise. He leaned down, hands gripping the arms of her chair, his face inches from hers. And then you walked into my daughter's classroom with scissors and broke that promise. Tiffany was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You keep saying that. Jacob straightened. Like not knowing makes it better. But it doesn't, Miss Colvin. Because my daughter didn't know you were coming either. She didn't know that morning would be the day someone decided she needed to be cut down to size. He walked back to the window, staring out at the storm. Lightning flashed, illuminating his profile. Do you know what the Korean syndicate calls me? White Ghost. I earned that name by being invisible until I wanted to be seen. By making problems disappear so completely it's like they never existed. He turned back to her. I could make you disappear, Miss Colvin. One phone call. You'd be on a boat to international waters before midnight. No body. No crime. No consequences. Tiffany's sobs turned to gasps. Please. Please don't. But I'm not going to do that. Jacob's voice was cold as ice. Because that would be mercy.
And you don't deserve mercy.
You deserve to live with what you've done. To wake up every day knowing that your entire life collapsed because you couldn't see a little black girl as worthy of basic dignity. He pressed a button on his desk. The door behind Tiffany opened. She turned and saw Jennifer standing in the doorway. The girl looked small in her school uniform, her hair now styled in even more elaborate braids, but her eyes held something Tiffany hadn't seen yesterday. Not anger, not fear.
Pity.
Jennifer, Jacob said gently. Tell Miss Cole then what you told me this morning. Jennifer walked forward, her posture perfect, her voice steady. I told my father that I felt sorry for you. Because you're so afraid of people who look different from you that you have to hurt children to feel powerful. She stopped a few feet from Tiffany. That's sad. And small. And I hope one day you figure out why you're so scared. Tiffany couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. This child she'd humiliated, stood before her with more grace and maturity than Tiffany had shown in 43 years of life. My daughter asked me not to hurt you, Jacob said. So I won't. But understand this, you are being watched. Every job you apply for, we'll be there first. Every city you move to, we'll know. Every time you think you've escaped, you'll see someone in a black suit and remember that the white ghost is still watching. He moved to Jennifer, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. You won't go to prison. You won't be physically harmed. But you will spend the rest of your life knowing that you are tolerated, not free. That your existence continues only because a 10-year-old girl showed you more mercy than you showed her. Tiffany collapsed forward, sobbing into her hands. "Get out," Jacob said quietly. "The elevator is waiting. Don't come near my daughter again. Don't speak her name. Don't even think about her. Because if I hear you've violated this one courtesy I'm extending, I will reconsider my daughter's request for mercy." Tiffany stumbled to her feet and ran from the office, her heels clicking frantically against the marble floor. Behind her, she heard Jennifer's voice, young and clear. "Dad, did I do okay?" "You did perfect, sweetheart. I'm proud of you." The elevator doors closed and Tiffany collapsed against the wall, her body racked with sobs. The descent felt eternal. When the doors finally opened to the lobby, she ran into the rain, gasping for air. A black sedan was parked at the curb. The driver's window rolled down. Minjun Park looked at her with eyes devoid of sympathy. "Miss Colvin, one more thing you should know." She stopped, rain soaking through her clothes. "Dr. Hughes resigned this afternoon. The board has installed new leadership. They're reviewing every case of discrimination at Oakwood Academy for the past decade." He smiled, but it was the smile of a shark. "Your legacy will be a cautionary tale. The teacher who thought she could break the wrong child." He rolled up the window and drove away, leaving Tiffany standing in the rain, destroyed but breathing, punished but alive. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. One new email. Subject: Your new reality. Inside was a list. Every job she'd applied to in the past 12 hours, all rejected. Every apartment she'd inquired about, applications denied. Every friend she'd called, no longer answering. At the bottom, one final line. "Welcome to the shadows, Ms. Colvin. This is where people like you belong." And Jennifer Smith? She'll be graduating from Oakwood Academy with honors, surrounded by a new administration that actually protects all students.
She'll thrive.
She'll succeed. And you'll read about it in the papers from whatever corner of the world you end up hiding in. The white ghost doesn't forget. And neither will anyone else. Tiffany dropped her phone into a puddle and walked into the storm, a ghost herself now, visible but powerless, alive but erased, breathing but broken. Above her, on the 47th floor, Jacob held his daughter close and watched the city that whispered his name, knowing that tomorrow it would whisper hers too. With respect, with protection, with the knowledge that Jennifer Smith was untouchable, because she was loved by a ghost. And ghosts never rest until their promises are kept. The morning sun broke through dissipating storm clouds as 3 black SUVs pulled up to the front gates of Oakwood Academy at precisely 7:42 a.m. Students on their way to class stopped and stared. Parents dropping off their children slowed their vehicles. Even the groundskeeper paused mid-rake to watch the procession. The center vehicle's door opened, and Jacob S. Smith stepped out first, 6 feet of controlled power in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most families' monthly mortgage. He buttoned his jacket with casual precision and extended his hand back toward the vehicle. Jennifer Smith emerged like royalty. Her uniform was pristine. Her leather satchel hung from one shoulder. But it was her hair that made everyone stop breathing. Intricate box braids woven with gold thread cascaded down her back, each one a work of art, each one a statement that screamed, "You cannot diminish me." She took her father's hand, her chin lifted, her eyes forward. She wasn't hiding, wasn't cowering. She was walking into her kingdom like she'd been born to rule it. Minjun Park emerged from the front vehicle, along with 2 other men in sharp suits. They flanked Jacob and Jennifer as they walked toward the entrance, not threatening, just present. A visible reminder that this child was not unprotected, would never be unprotected again. Whispers erupted across the courtyard. "Is that Jennifer Smith? Who's that with her? I heard her dad is like crazy rich. Did you see those cars?" Marcus Chun, the boy who'd always sat near the back of Miss Colvin's class, nudged his friend. "Dude, that's the girl Cole then cut her hair. I heard Cole then got fired and the whole school board got replaced." "No way." Yes way.
My mom's on the PDA.
She said they found out Colvin was racist or something, and the principal covered it up. Everything's been crazy since yesterday. Inside the administrative office, newly appointed Principal Dr. Alicia Monroe stood waiting. She was young for a principal, 42, but she'd built her reputation on equity, reform, and zero tolerance for discrimination. The board had hired her on an emergency basis after Dr. Hughes's sudden resignation, and she'd spent 16 hours reviewing every file, every complaint, every buried incident. She'd wept when she'd read Jennifer Smith's case. Now, watching the girl approach through the glass doors with her father beside her, Dr. Monroe stepped forward with genuine warmth. Mr. Smith. Jennifer. Welcome. She extended her hand. I'm Dr. Alicia Monroe, the new principal. I want you to know that what happened in Ms. Colvin's classroom was unconscionable, and this administration will spend every day earning back your trust. Jacob shook her hand, his grip measured. Dr. Monroe, I've read your work on restorative justice in education. Impressive. She blinked, surprised. You've read my doctoral thesis? I read everything about the people responsible for my daughter's well-being. His smile was polite, but his eyes were absolute. I trust your reputation is earned, not performative. It is. Dr. Monroe knelt down to Jennifer's eye level. Jennifer, I want to personally apologize for what you experienced. You deserved better. You deserve better. And I promise you, this school will be better. Jennifer studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you, Dr. Monroe. I'd like to go to class now. Of course. Dr. Monroe stood. Your new teacher is Ms. Patricia Chen. She's brilliant, kind, and excited to have you in her advanced literature class. Room 4B has been reassigned. You'll be in room 2A now. Jacob's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on Jennifer's shoulder. Room 4B is being converted into a resource center for diversity and inclusion education. Every teacher at this academy will complete mandatory training there. The room where harm occurred will become the room where healing is taught. Dr. Monroe's voice was firm. Jennifer's experience will not be forgotten. It will be the catalyst for institutional change. Jacob nodded slowly, respect flickering in his eyes. Good. They walked through the hallways, and the sea of students parted. Not out of fear, out of something else.
Curiosity.
Respect. Recognition that something fundamental had shifted in their school's power structure. Claire Donovan, who'd watched the haircut incident from the third row, stepped forward as Jennifer passed. Jennifer? I'm sorry I didn't say anything when Miss Colvin when she hurt you. I was scared, and that was wrong. Jennifer stopped, studying the girl who'd been part of the popular crowd that had never spoken to her before. Thank you for saying that. Your hair is beautiful, Claire added quietly. It was beautiful before, too. I should have told you that. Other students nodded, murmuring agreement. The tide had turned. Jennifer wasn't the outsider anymore. She was the girl who'd stood up to injustice and won. They reached room 2A. Ms. Patricia Chen stood at the door, a Korean-American woman in her 30s with warm eyes and a genuine smile. Jennifer, it's wonderful to have you in my class. I've prepared a seat for you right here. She gestured to a desk by the window, positioned with clear sightlines and respect for personal space. We're discussing Maya Angelou today. Still I rise. I think you'll have interesting insights. Jacob knelt beside his daughter one final time. You okay? I'm okay, Dad. Jennifer's voice was steady, but her hand squeezed his. Really? If anything happens, I know. She touched the sapphire pendant at her throat. But I don't think anything will. Not anymore. Jacob kissed her forehead and stood. He looked at Miss Chun with eyes that held both warning and hope. Take care of her. With my life, Miss Chun replied and meant it. Jacob walked back through the hallway, Minjun falling into step beside him. Students moved aside, not out of fear, but recognition. This was the man who dismantled an entire administration in 48 hours for his daughter. This was power they'd only read about in books. In the parking lot, Jacob paused before entering his vehicle. He looked back at the academy, The building that had tried to break his daughter and instead had been broken itself. His phone buzzed. A message from his intelligence team. Tiffany Cole then relocated to Montana, working warehouse night shift.
Divorced.
Estranged from family. Living under constant surveillance as agreed. No violations reported. Jacob read it without emotion and deleted it. Colvin's punishment wasn't his concern anymore. She would live in the shadows she'd created, a cautionary tale told in whispers. His phone buzzed again. This time from Jennifer. A simple text with a photo attached. First day with Ms. Chun. She's nice. Learning about Maya Angelou. Love you, Dad. The photo showed Jennifer at her desk, smiling genuinely for the first time in days, her braids catching the morning light like a crown. Jacob allowed himself a rare, genuine smile. He typed back. Proud of you. Always. Text if you need anything. He slipped into the SUV, and Minjun started the engine. Back to the office? Minjun asked.
Yes.
We have a board meeting at 10, and I want updates on the scholarship fund. The Jennifer Smith Educational Foundation?
Yes.
I want it operational by the end of the month. Full ride scholarships for minority students who've faced discrimination in their schools. Legal support for families fighting systemic racism. I want Jennifer's name to mean something beyond what happened to her. Minjun smiled. Already in progress. We've had 300 applications since the announcement yesterday. Good. Jacob looked out the window as they pulled away from Oakwood Academy. Make sure every recipient knows they're protected, that they matter, that someone is watching over them the way I watch over my daughter. The motorcade disappeared into traffic, leaving behind a school forever changed, and a little girl who would grow up knowing that love wasn't just gentle words. Sometimes it was a father who would burn down empires to keep his promises. Inside room 2A, Miss Chin began reading Maya Angelou's words aloud, and when she reached the final stanza, I rise, I rise, I rise, Jennifer's voice joined the chorus, strong and clear and unbroken. Because she had risen, and she would keep rising, protected by a ghost who loved her more than power, more than empires, more than anything in this world. If this story moved you, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts on justice, family, and the power of standing up for what's right. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because stories like this, stories about the fierce love that protects the vulnerable and holds the powerful accountable, need to be told. Share this with someone who needs to know that they matter, that they're protected, and that their dignity is worth fighting for. Thank you for watching. Until the next story, remember, some promises are worth keeping no matter the cost. Stay strong. Stay protected, and never underestimate the power of a parent's love.